Welcome to the In Cobb We Trust podcast. And today we're going to be talking about your favorite topic, money, as well as having an intro and conversation with our future District 2 Commissioner, Erick Allen. And I'm going to start the episode off with a patient story. So I wanted to talk about COVID. And there are a lot of people that work in the hospital, that are in healthcare, that are still experiencing the effects of COVID. I think that maybe society had moved on, maybe other people in the hospital have moved on, but for the people that took care of dying COVID patients, I know that it's still as real as it was yesterday. And for many of us, we work in the hospital and experience PTSD because we walked the same halls that we did during COVID. And every room, I can point to almost every single room in some place in the hospital where I had somebody die of COVID. And it was such a difficult period of time. And I almost walked away from medicine entirely. I almost said, you know what? I'm done. I can't do this anymore. And I was getting close. It was during the Delta wave. And I got this consult. I read the chart. It was this patient who had cancer and newly diagnosed cancer. And so I went in the patient's room. I did my thing. I was talking to them. I was getting to know them. He was really upset. He had COVID. Nobody could visit him because I don't think people remember at that time you couldn't come in the hospital, right? The only time you can come in the hospital if somebody was dying. And somebody like myself called down to the front and said, hey, listen, these people are coming. They can be let in. And he was alone. I did my thing. I talked to him. I got to know him and how he was from Louisiana. He was a big LSU Tigers fan. And he did a lot of work in Smyrna with the homeless population and Must Ministries. And I started to talk about, so what did the oncologist talk to you? And he looks at me straight in the face. He's like, oncologist? Do you think you have the right patient? And my heart sank. It sank into my stomach because I didn't know if it was the right patient. So I go outside, I look at the room number, and I go in and I realize that I had walked into the wrong room. I had walked into the completely wrong room. And I felt, to his credit, we chuckled about it. We just started laughing. And I noticed that on the stool in his room, there was this package, a bag. And he was so weak, he couldn't open the bag. He couldn't get up to get to the bag. And, nurses were not coming in all the time during COVID. They were limiting their risk. And so I said, okay, well, why don't we open this bag together? It's from your family, it looks like. And I took out these things and I took out all these cards that people had written him. And there was a little plant too. I remember putting it on the windowsill. And we had a good talk. And I said, I'm going to come back tomorrow and I'll just grab a cup of coffee with you. And so it was during that time when I thought, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. And the ability, because I went back the next morning, I had a cup of coffee with him and he said thank you to me for allowing him to see all those cards because it gave him hope again. It gave him hope that he would see his family again. And he also said something to me. He said, I've been thinking a lot about you. And I've also been thinking a lot about the guy that you had to go talk to and tell that he had cancer. And he made me feel that the work that I did was meaningful. He made me feel as though it still mattered taking care of someone. And that always stuck with me because I went home. He died maybe a few months later from complications of lung disease. And I called his wife because I wasn't working in the hospital, but by some happenstance, I knew that he had been admitted and our team had been consulted. And I spoke to her and I introduced myself, and she says, "Oh, you're Dr. P. He spoke so much about you." And she goes on to tell me how much it meant to her and to him that I had spent that time with him, that I had given him that hope when the whole time I was thinking he had saved me. He had brought me back from the brink. And I was reminded of that because just this not too long ago, I was asked to go see a patient. She had, unfortunately, colon cancer, and it was not able to be taken out, and she needed surgery, and she was scared. She was just really scared. And I spoke to her, I spoke to her husband, lovely thing. I spoke to all three children. And I knew that I can't fix this cancer. And it's only a matter of weeks to months before, unfortunately, she dies. But in that moment, before she was going for surgery, I was able to talk to her and try to take away some fear. Just try to be a human to a human with her. And she thanked me at the end of it. She invited me to her house after the hospitalization. She called me family because I sat down and I just spent time with her and her family. And it was just so meaningful for me as a human being to help take care of another human being. And that got me thinking that that's how we're programmed. We're programmed to feel good when we help another human being. I think that's how humans historically over the centuries, millennia, have advanced, is that we help each other. We cooperate. It is not normal to hate each other. And in fact, it just takes too much energy. It feels much better to care for someone else. I believe that's how we are programmed. And that leads into this idea that the work that myself is doing here on this podcast, that my co-producers are, that all the people that volunteer in this moment when fascism seems to be taking over, it is meaningful work because it's for our country. It's for America. It's for the idea of freedom. And that's something worth fighting for. You know, that's the meaning, is that we're trying to make this country better for everyone, not just the select billionaire class, which is fleecing, just stealing from all of us. That's the meaning in this work. And so it's going to get hard, y'all. You're going to have stuff happen in your life. You're going to have family stuff. You're going to have health stuff, car trouble. There's going to be a number of things that life is going to throw at you that will take you away from the work that we all are doing in order to form a more perfect union. That's okay. That is okay. You will need to take some time and step away. Do not feel bad about that. I just need you to get back in the game when you can. We need everyone fighting with us. And we know some people go down, like in football, right? Some people get injured. We know it's going to happen. It's just reality. But that also means that you got to be ready. Next person up. Next person fills that spot. And all of the organizing that we're doing, I need everyone to take that kind of mentality. That do the work, take time when you need to, take care of your families, take care of your mental health, take care of your health overall. But continue to do the work. There are people fighting with you. We are together. And I'll end this little portion by saying, I organized a meeting in this office this past week of all these group leaders from across our district and the county. All these people have decided that they're going to step up. They're going to be a leader. They're going to take whatever cohort of people that are listening to them and put them to work. But we all got them in a room and a brainstorming session and came out with a plan to win the special election that's happening April 29th. April 19th, early voting day 1. April 21st to the 25th, early voting. And then the last day that you can vote, April 29th. So the county commissioner that we're going to elect is Erick Allen. And before he gets here, I'll tell you that I've known this cat for a long time. It is wild. I met him in the Cobb Galleria, I believe, and it was after Trump got elected. I was super pissed off. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to see what this Democratic game is all about. I don't know. I don't know anything from anybody, but let me go be on the VIP, whatever package, and let's see what happens. And so I don't know anybody. My wife and I are there. We're milling around, and I get into a conversation with a group of people. And as anybody who's ever got into a conversation with me knows that I can get pretty passionate. And we're leaving this VIP section and down the elevators, and I met this guy that was in that group, and he introduces himself. He's like, "Hi, I'm Erick Allen. I'm running for House District 40 at the time." And I didn't know what House district I was in, and he asked me where I lived, and I told him. He's like, "Oh, you're in my district," and it just so happened that we ended up sitting at the same table and continue the conversation and such that when I left, he stopped me and said, "Hey, let me get your contact info." And that's the first time I really met Erick Allen. I asked him to come do some work at the high school with me, Campbell High School with me, and he did. Then he ran, eventually won House District 40 and was the state representative there. And since that time, him and I text back and forth. We have gone out for drinks in the past. And well, it's always funny because I am always very loud, in your face, wanting to fight, wanting to push, wanting to be very aggressive with the messaging. And Erick always brings that yin to my yang. And I always appreciate that about him because he has shown an ability to cross the aisle and make friends on the other side. And while uh, that's difficult, that's going to be difficult. And how do we work with the other side while still maintaining our morals? It's something that I think is difficult. And yet I think that maybe he, among other people, has really the best chance to be successful because Erick has shown himself to be a true man of the people, and at the same time is pretty clear-headed, understands nuance, understands complexity, is able to talk to people even when I have been in his ear and in his grill before, uh, throughout the years. And so I can't wait till he comes. I can't wait to our conversation. And I can't wait to you guys to get to know him like I do, in the sense that he's a real human being. And he's a smart human being. And he's one that is somebody that cares. And somebody that this district and this county would really do well to elect. Because we need people that are smart. We need people that will talk. We need people that don't get ruffled all the time. And I'm glad that he decided to come on this podcast, even though I'm sure he's a bit nervous with me asking the questions. So it's going to be fun. All right. So I am very excited to introduce the second guest ever on the podcast, the next commissioner from District 2, Erick Allen. Welcome.
Hello, sir. How are you?
Good. I spent a little bit of time earlier discussing how we met, but I'm just curious to hear your version of how we met and what you remember from that night.
Man,
If you remember that night.
I don't remember exactly how we met.
It was the Cobb County Gala. It was when Tom Perez came as a speaker. And then I met you at the VIP room. You introduced yourself in the elevator. We were at that table. And then before I left, you stopped me and got my number. And that's how...
At Cobb Prom? At the big, yeah.
So that was that. And then you met the principal of Campbell High School with me at one meeting.
I do remember. That's what I was going to say is when you were at the Campbell Foundation. But
Still am.
Gala. Really?
Yeah, still I'm the president. Now, can you believe
which is good as a grant.
Yeah.
That's good.
It is.
Yeah.
Right? How often does that happen? Before we get into the political topics today,
yeah.
I wanted for the audience to get to know you a little bit. And one thing that is always fun for me is that we've always had a really good back and forth. Where I'm, the fired up aggressive one, you're like, yo, man, settle down. And I wonder, uh, if you could talk to a little bit about how you grew up a little bit and the influences in your life and what lessons do you bring that you hope to bring to being District 2 Commissioner?
So, my life was a very interesting middle class childhood in Nashville. My father was a preacher, but also in the political space. My mother was a teacher.
Okay.
Taught 31 years at the same public school before she retired. So, literally 2 generations of people in our community she taught before she left. So, that's dedication to a community, if I've ever heard of it. And so, I have a brother, younger, sister, older.
I know you were the middle.
Yeah, I'm a middle child.
So am I. Yeah, that
explains a lot.
that
explains a lot. But yeah, so have a younger brother. He's still in Nashville. Older sister still in Nashville. Their families are all there and all about. So so growing up was interesting. I was probably the least likely of my parents' children to be where I am now. Wasn't the best at taking school seriously. Was more into sports, more into
which one?
Friends basketball.
Okay. March Madness, man. Gators won big yesterday.
I'm a Vandy guy, and we blew a 12-point lead in the second half. But, yeah, it was bad. SEC, 14 teams in, though, 16 teams. You can no longer say it's just the best conference in football. It's the best conference all around. Just put that there.
Yeah.
Especially baseball, if you watch baseball.
Oh, Gators, baby. Yeah, absolutely.
It's top notch. But anyway, so I was probably the rebel of the group, And,
you?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
You?
Yes, me. And I
come on.
Well, it's funny, it's you started off by saying, you're more the rah-rah. And, one of the things I really got from my father being a preacher is there's a crescendo to a message. And a lot of people see and are able to witness the beginnings. No preacher starts off a sermon yelling at you.
Yeah.
But by the time you get to the end and you get to that point where you need to really drive home a message,
yeah,
that's more of the way I communicate. I follow that model of, let's get people in, let's suck them in, let's have the message. Doesn't mean that there's not passion or anger that's there. It's just, when do you release it to make it the most impactful? If all you do is scream at the wall, people tune you out.
Yeah.
But if you can lure them in, have the reason, bring them to the table, and then turn it off, then you can have a much more impact. And that's just one of the things I learned watching, my father kind of not only in his job in the pulpit, but also just in life. Just in general, was a man of very, very few words. But when he did speak or when he did get upset, it was go time. It was go time. And so growing up was great. My father passed away a couple of years ago.
I'm sorry.
Actually, it was right after I was on 11 Alive doing the on-air results. I was the Democratic voice for 11 Alive for the Warnock Ossoff runoff.
Oh.
And that was on a Tuesday, and then my father passed that Thursday. So he got to see me on that, and then passed away that Thursday. That was December 8th of 22, I believe. But yeah, so growing up was great. I mean, that's kind of where I got my start. I still have that, preacher-teacher mentality. I think they're both the same. And that's kind of how I operate.
Okay. We have this plan. We need to win this election April 29th. District 2. A lot of people don't know about it, but if you live in Marietta.
And 4.
And one of the things that we're trying to do with this podcast is appeal to young people. Mm-hmm. And so my question to you is, what do you think young people, one, can gain from having you as their county commissioner? And two, what is your message to them, to maybe somebody who doesn't really know how to get involved and wants to get involved, but is like, I don't know what to do? What is your message to them?
Reach out. If you want to get involved, reach out to yourself, reach out to me, just contact somebody, because the seat at the table is there. At least I believe it is. I was at the Capitol a couple of weeks ago for the Young Democrats in Georgia Day. And one of the things I said to them is, the future is now. We just got to give you a seat. People talk about the leaders of tomorrow. No, it's the leaders of today. Young people, if you think about any serious movement that's happened in this country, it's all been driven by the youth. Young people the civil rights movement would not have been what it was without young people. Mm-hmm. John Lewis was not the John Lewis we think of when he crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge. John Lewis looked a lot like the kids at Kennesaw State.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting you say that, because you're right. It was young people, and yet it almost feels like social media and the internet has had us more disconnected than ever. But we're more connected than ever. It's this paradox where people feel incredibly lonely.
I think it's a passive nature that we've seen develop over the last generations. You can't, any young person out there listening, you can't wait on someone to give you permission. Nope. If you think about all of those activists that I'm talking about,
I love it. I love to hear you say it.
no one waited to be given permission to do sit-ins at counties in Nashville. No one waited to boycott the buses in Alabama. No one waited to get permission to be freedom riders while they were in colleges all across the South. So I think that there is, and I don't know why. I'd love to know, talk to more young people and find out why, but don't be passive. There's a moment, and right now there's a huge moment. And a flashpoint in our, where are we going to be? What is the country that they raise their families in going to look like? And they can't wait on us to give them permission.
They're just going to take it.
Take the moment. You have to take the moment.
So what you're saying, and I 100%, 1,000% agree, is that if young people want things to change, they need to actually take the power and go after it. And what I'm hearing is that they have a person who will listen.
Not just, so take the power is one thing. I want to emphasize take the moment.
Okay, tell me more.
Take the moment. There's an opportunity right now in a chasm where if you think about what's going on nationally in Congress and you're saying Democrats don't have a voice, I disagree. Some of the younger people in that chamber have a voice. Yeah, okay. And they're seizing that moment.
Like the AOCs of the world, the Jasmine Crockett's of the world.
I mean, I would even
Chris Murphy,
Kima Williams, and that. I mean, they're the ones that I'll give you a perfect example. Al Williams, not Al Williams. Oh God, what's his name?
Green.
Al Green.
Mm-hmm.
Took his cane, shook it. Got kicked out. Did anything else? Got censored for it. That's not what people remember about what happened at Trump's speech. They remembered all of those people we just talked about wearing those black shirts, standing up and walking out, and the camera following them out. And then them getting on social media afterwards while he was still talking and giving that counter narrative. That was taking a moment. They didn't wait for the official DNC response that came later that night. They saw a moment, they stood up, and they took it. And that's what people talk about. So it's not just taking power. And I think that's where we sometimes you and I may even differ, is I don't think it's about wrestling away the power. Mm-hmm. But it's about moments that lead up to a movement. You can't have a movement without moments. And there are flashpoints that become that moment. The civil rights movement.
I mean, I think we're seeing that right now, right? We have Marietta protests every Saturday. We have Indivisible all over the county, Ackworth, Cobb, Northwest Metro Atlanta, Kennesaw. I think, to that degree. And we saw that. We had the leaders here.
There was a protest today in Marietta, in the square.
Yeah. And I think that they are doing that, right? And one of the questions or the concerns that...
Well, let me stop you there, though. Are they? If you were to go to that protest today in Marietta, in the square, mm-hmm. wasn't young people there?
Well, there was one at Kennesaw State, but I think it was Thursday, but like the weather was so bad. And they had about 20, 15 people there. So your argument, if I'm hearing, is there's a moment that needs to be taken, but we haven't done it.
I think it's information.
Okay.
I think it's information. If you think about it, I've been around the Democratic Party for years, decades. The young Dems of Cobb had almost become extinct. You're now starting to see them resurrect. You're starting to see the young Dems on different college campuses starting to resurrect, starting to be more active, starting to be more engaged. The question is, will that sustain? I remember the first Cobb Dems meeting after Trump's first election win.
Yeah.
And there were hundreds of people in that room in November of 2016.
I was one of them.
You look around now, I can probably count on both hands how many of the people that showed up with the energy in that room for the first time are still in the fight, are still there. There's got to be that movement and that momentum to hold people and hold their attention, understanding that the fight is not over.
Yes. It's a 20-year battle.
There's work to do. You probably don't even remember when I was running for State House and we did that video in your house.
Oh, I remember. Jericho was there. I talked about it last week. Yeah.
Karen Bear, who was a dear friend, was there and kind of represented that generational differences that we have. Do you remember what she said about her life? She said, "I never thought in my 60s I would be fighting the same fight I fought in the 60s." Think about that. That was an indictment on our generation because we kind of dropped the ball. Because there were things that were fought for in the 60s, 70s. My generation came along, enjoyed the fruits of the fight, but didn't realize the fight wasn't over.
Right.
And now my daughter, unfortunately, is going to have to fight the same things her grandparents fought.
And what lessons do we learn from that? I think you alluded to it, and something that I've been focused on trying to avoid is building an infrastructure that is sustainable, that holds people in, and trying to get people together. And that's why I think that while, the circumstances that led to this special election, we can talk about ad nauseum, nevertheless, we're here. And my message to the people in the room, everybody at large, is I want to send a message. I want to send a message here in Cobb County that we take our election seriously, that we take our responsibility seriously, and that we're not going to just allow people to draw us however we want and take, I take the power from us, right? Because what happens if a Republican wins this seat? We have different board of elections. Let's talk now about some Cobb County specific things. And I think we mentioned this. I asked this question during the debate about housing affordability. And I have a unique perspective on housing affordability, having purchased land, tore down houses, have built houses, sold them, I've rented them out. And dirt's not cheap. Building materials not cheap. Labor not cheap. All of go together and combined with supply-demand mismatch has led us to the situation where housing affordability is increasingly unattainable for many young people. You've mentioned opportunity zones.
Enterprise zones. Yeah.
Can you explain to people who don't know a jack anything about that? Because, life's hard, right? Like, you're just trying to go to work, take care of your kids, put food on the table. Like, you don't really want to worry about all this other stuff, but it's helpful for people to understand. So, in your words, what is an economic zone, opportunity zone, and how does that help?
Well, let me not bore people with the details and definitions. Let me give some examples.
Fair enough, yeah.
So just in a nutshell, not to dodge, sorry, people don't think I'm dodging it, but when you take an opportunity zone or which have been around for, those are incentive laden approaches to get people to develop.
So opportunity zone, for example, let's say we have a school or what have you.
Well, let me give you a good real-time example.
Yeah, go for it.
You can take an enterprise zone, let's say drop that halo over Town Center Mall, because everybody's worried about that right now.
Right.
And now make infrastructure and development changes more beneficial through either grants or tax abatements or...
So making it cheaper to build.
Making it more advantageous for the developer to invest.
Okay.
And one of the things we have, and I said this on different podcasts, people forget the differences between redevelopment and gentrification. And this is just Erick's. When when you look at gentrification, it's people going in and developing an area with no intent of the people who have resided there for decades, generations to be back.
Right. Right.
Reinvestment is when you go in and you redevelop an area to make it better for the people who've invested generations of their life in that area.
Couldn't agree more.
It's a completely different mindset. And so the opportunity and the opportunity zones, all these economic districts, TAD, are for both residential and commercial to be able to rise to a level of sustainability so everyone benefits. And if you think about Cobb County, we've got pockets of prosperity. We may not have a holistic vision of what prosperity looks like for all of Cobb. And you talk about housing, workforce housing, whatever it is, just that there are multiple things that are a threat to that. Very little of it has to do with what happens at the county. To be honest, it's a federal issue, it's a state issue. What the county can do is advocate effectively.
Yeah, I think that's what we're looking for.
Advocate effectively for the things that need to change. Mm-hmm. One thing that I've been hyper-focused on and looking at since I've been in the legislature is how we treat short-term rentals. If you think about supply and demand, you think about inventory. When you've got 4,000, 5,000 homes bought up by investors in a certain community, and they're all short-term rentals, Airbnb, and they're only occupied 40% of the time, that's taking every one of those homes off of the market, which means the market is tighter, prices are higher. And so what do we do to allow that enterprise to continue, but maybe put some constraints or some disincentives for so many investment properties to be there that aren't for home. Now, there's a difference between someone investing in a property, once again, to redevelop it, sell it to someone that becomes their home. But we've got a trend of people buying up homes and sitting on them, waiting to flip them later, or just renting them out as an Airbnb. Perfectly fine, but there's got to be something in place that the state can do to either disincent that through taxing them differently.
And I'm glad you've made the distinction between, I'm going to make a distinction. You can tell me if you agree. Between big investment firms that own 4,000, 5,000 homes, taking up large, or just the lone entrepreneur that is trying to set up their life, right? We're all subject to the same economic system.
Are hurting the entrepreneur that's doing it as
exactly. So I just wanted to make it clear to people is that really what you're talking about, not the individual investors, not the mom and pop, not the the family that gets together and has a couple homes to try to solidify their economic foothold. Yeah. It is these large corporations.
You've got large funds that are buying up property just as investment pieces,
and I think sometimes that gets lost.
Yeah, it does.
In the discussion.
And like I said, it shrinks inventory. Demand continues to grow. We don't do it. The other thing that we have to really look at is the inventory and how do we make it easier for developers to develop and build.
And part of that comes to zoning, inevitably.
It all comes to zoning, but it comes with having a commissioner that's transparent. One of the things that I really want to do, kind of the first task, is get into all of these different communities in District 2. I mean, you got the map up. There's multiple communities of interest within District 2. It's not a single community of interest.
Right.
But getting with each one of those areas and saying, if you have a master plan, let's revisit it. If you don't have one, let's start to build that master plan. Because let the community have the vision of what they want their community to look like. Mm-hmm. And then we go into the development community and say, how can you help them build this? That way, it's not this.
I mean, I would love that. Right now, it seems so adversarial at times.
Oh, it is. It's
painful.
It is not an easy process for developers to do business in Cobb County.
Yeah, I agree.
It's not. And that doesn't mean opening the floodgates and letting people do whatever they want. But once again, if the community has a vision, allow the development community to understand and see what that vision is, then they can say, here's how I can contribute to that community. That's a win-win for everybody. And it's not as hostile as it is now.
But it's crazy to me that it's so self-evident. It seems like it would make sense, and yet it hasn't happened.
Yeah. Everybody comes into office with their own perspectives and their own experience. I think a huge advantage that I have is coming in from, two of the committees I sat on was banks and banking The other one was human
Wasn't
economic
that?
development and tourism. And you think about that from the sandwich that you create between the funding mechanism and the development part of it.
Mhm.
That's a perspective that I think I can bring to the commission and even to the county that's just not there right now. I took a lot of hits in the primary because everybody said, I took a lot of money from developers. Well, I took money from friends who trusted me because they knew that I understood the pain that a lot of people are going through trying to make Cobb better. I don't know a single person that is using their money to invest in an area they don't believe in. They're doing it because
Right.
they believe in Cobb.
Right.
And we've got to treat them like they believe in Cobb, and we've got to make sure that the community is protected and has what they want. And I'm almost willing to promise that we will have a much better relationship, along with the Unified Development Code and all the other things in motion. That, to me, that is going to be a pivotal moment for Cobb County to really start to develop and shine in a way that it hasn't in the recent past.
So let's talk about something that got a lot of attention this last election: transportation. Transportation in Cobb County. And, the M-SPOS was this large 30-year tax, and a lot of people have a lot of different opinions on it, which I'm not really focused on that so much because it just didn't pass. It didn't pass almost 2-1. And from your perspective, what can mobility transportation look like in Cobb County? And what are ideas that we haven't heard of or thought of?
So, I'll give you a real long answer on that
I love long.
because most people don't know what I do full time.
Yeah.
So my full time job, I work for a technology company, the fourth largest behind Oracle, Workday, and SAP. And I run a government affairs wing that looks at all 50 states and their legislation, about 3,200 cities and counties, and about 1,400 school boards.
Okay.
I am constantly looking at what's going on around this country. I'm constantly visiting. Since the last election, I've already had 2 different meetings with different counties, both in the West Coast.
Okay.
There's a lot we could be doing different,
Mm-hmm.
and I've seen it up close of how you can connect communities. One of the most interesting things I've seen from a county's perspective, and it goes back into the development, in their planning and in their zoning and development, they were having the development community participate in the infrastructure of transit. So what does that mean? Great, you're going to build this building, anything else. How do we build it where it has a covered bus stop right under that building?
I mean, that's a level of organization. I mean, and communication that would be great, right?
Once again, so you start thinking about how do we. You're going to have this building that's up against this waterfront. Part of this zoning is we're going to have a stipulation that you've got to build a trail that connects to the main trail. Now you got more trails. It has to have a bike lane. Okay, no one's going to say no. I'm not going to do my big development because I got to build a bike lane and a path,
Mm-hmm.
a trail. So it's just having that foresight of all the different modes of mobility because mobility is not just buses, trains, Uber, point to point, driving. It's also all the other pieces of infrastructure that makes the community more mobile. And I think by having the vision and the experiences of seeing what others have done and tried, what's worked, what's not worked, will make a big difference. And so, in that, when you talk about the mobility, it's I've often said just because the SPLOS failed doesn't mean the problem went away.
Right.
If people didn't vote that we don't have a problem.
Right.
Voted they didn't want the SPLOS.
Like try going anywhere at 5:00. Trying to go down 75 or down or across Roswell Road, let's say for East Cobb. I mean, it's painful,
and it's a problem for not just the commuters, but also for enterprise, for businesses.
You can't get the workers to the places.
I often tell people it's not good enough to just be able to get the talent that can get to you Monday through Friday from 8 to 5. You want to have access to the best talent in the region, and then they should have the access to be able to get to that job. And it's an issue that we got to talk about a little bit differently than we have in the past. We talked about we often talk about mobility and transit in terms of the heavy infrastructure and in terms of ridership. We don't talk about it in terms of you, average Joe, who has never ridden a bus in your life, being able to get to and from 15 minutes faster.
Or to get to the airport. That's one thing.
Or to get to the airport. I mean, I fly a lot.
Yeah.
And I would love to be able to get to the airport in a more efficient way, is what I'll say, than what I have now. When I first moved to Cobb, I was torn between living close to my office, which was in the Cumberland area,
Mm-hmm.
or moving closer to Midtown where I could take the train to the Arts Center, because I was going to my office less than I was going to the airport. And it was a hard decision. It would have been an easier decision. I mean, I chose Cobb, but it would have been an easier decision if Cobb had some type of transit that would get me to and from the airport efficiently without having to drive, park, shuttle, walk, gate. That was a long process.
Yeah, I have this idea or dream in my head where you can live in any part of Cobb County, get to work in Cobb County, because we have we have an economic powerhouse of a district when you include
a county.
It's an economic powerhouse, mm-hmm. And it just feels like we're not as competitive when we don't have the ability for people to get around easily, especially like single riders. I get, like, if you have a family and you have kids, you're going to take a car.
Yeah.
I get that. You're normal. I would do the same. I have 3 kids. Mm-hmm. But if I was just going to work, let's say if I just wanted to go to the hospital, for example, there's no easy way for me to do it. Mm-hmm. And I just hope that I'm encouraged to hear you speak like this, because it represents a change in thinking that we need in the sense of recognizing what is the actual problem.
Mm-hmm. My father used to always drill into my head that you can't really have a vision unless you have all 3 components of a vision: hindsight, insight, and foresight. These are the types of issues where we dwell so much on the history and want to hold on to the hindsight of Cobb, of the Cobb of glory days, as we see it. Not necessarily looking at what are the real problems we have today. We are not the same rural exurban county that we were 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I would argue we are more urban suburban.
Oh, yeah.
And very little rural. You got to go all the way to the West Cobb to get to rural.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got to start thinking that way. And that comes with leadership, with bringing people along. The same things and the trappings that people in certain areas love are the same things that make us an urban community, where you got to grow with it. You got to together have a vision of where are we today, and then the foresight of what is that going to look like down the road. And that's where the planning and zoning and all the other things, having those master plans, will provide that. In my opinion, hopefully will provide that foresight that we need to continue to grow.
So I mentioned this on the debate, but I wanted to bring it up again because I think it's so important. It's near and dear to my heart. It's the state of elder care. And I know that there's a lot of stuff that it's really federal, it's really state. Mm-hmm. But just for the people listening, because, so many people in the hospital, when I meet them, they're in the most vulnerable position. They were living by themselves, for example. Something happens. They have a heart attack, they have a stroke, they fell, they broke something, they had to go to rehab. They can no longer safely live alone, and then they have to end up either in a nursing home or rehab or what have you. And for the people out there listening to the podcast, what do we say to them in terms of how does the county commission advocate? Because I know you can't actually make laws, but how do we advocate to improve the care of the elderly?
So that's a great question, because there's a couple of things. One, and this is a gem in Cobb County that people just don't really know that we do, but we have a very good seniors program. We have multiple senior centers across the county. We try to keep seniors engaged and active, and that's part of it. That's, when you think about the health, it's the whole health, and you know that. I mean, it's really keeping people active, engaged. Absolutely. In their community. So that's something that I'm really interested in how we can even develop further. on that end. When it comes to healthcare, one of the I hate harking on my days in the state house, but I was on human relations and aging, which governed all of the senior living facilities, developmental disabilities, all those different areas, especially on the aging community. And one of the things that always came up and we just could not ever get much progress on was the care that seniors receive when they're in homes and facilities. And that's something that we really need to continue to advocate for, because most of our seniors at some point end up in some type of home, whether it's assisted living, a SNF, whatever, skilled nursing facility. I guess I have these real words.
I know what you're saying.
Yeah, let's talk that talk. But yes, skilled nursing facility, memory care facility. I mean, all of these are out there. We do have to advocate for better care and more affordability.
Yes,
that
it is expensive.
Very expensive. We're part of that sandwich generation that was talked about a lot, where we're caring for our small. I've got a 9-year-old and I've got a 77-year-old mother. I mean, it's
you're stuck in the middle. Yeah, exactly.
It's tough, and so we've got to find ways to improve the quality of care, improve engagement within our senior community, but also figure out a way to get costs down. And what's really bad about these facilities, and I know some people will say this is, they'll yell at me for this, but it's the reality. They pay the workers in these facilities little to nothing, but the costs keep going up. And that needs to seriously be addressed. There is and that goes into the quality of care as well. I mean, when you're paying someone who's caring for someone's aging mother, grandmother, and their switching opportunity is working in the drive-thru at McDonald's, you're not going to have the high quality of care that you need. And so that has to be part of the conversation. Once again, something we can advocate for, not something we do policy-wise.
Right. Right.
But yeah, it's a huge problem.
So, I'm a Campbell High School graduate, IB laureate, and as I mentioned, part of the foundation. And so how does the county commission, and we talked about this, I keep going back to the debate, but how can the county commission specifically improve our collaboration with the school board, or our work together with the school board to address challenges that students face?
So let's talk about some real examples of what that looks like. And one of the first comes to mind is the 2,000 plus Cobb students who are underhoused. Hard to be focused on getting quality education if you don't know where your next meal is coming from because of food insecurity and you had to sleep in the backseat of a car.
Yeah.
So homelessness in Cobb is growing. And I think I talked about this it's something that we have to address. Not one of those sexy topics people like talking about. And I can guarantee you, a majority of the communities that may be watching this or live in Cobb, I don't even see homeless people, but they're there.
Oh, they are.
Just because it's not your problem doesn't mean it's not a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so, looking at it holistically, it's just one example of, all right, how do we identify these kids in Cobb schools that are underhoused, having these insecurities, and how do we connect them to the right resources in the community?
Interesting.
And that's something that the Cobb Commission can do, a direct impact on schools as an issue. Having these master plans, that also gives Cobb schools a master plan, because we're saying this community believes this type of housing is what they want. We know it's likely coming because the developer may look at that land and say, all right.
And that means you're going to need to make space in the school.
Exactly. But that foresight, once again, having that full vision, that foresight is collaborating with the schools in a way that makes them better, makes them more efficient, able to plan for student load better. People don't realize a lot of the argument when you have a zoning for a new apartment building and they say it's a 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom. Well, the school board always says, well, don't do 3-bedroom apartments. You know why? More likely to have kids. So that's why Cobb is flooded with 1- and 2-bedroom apartments. and not 3-bedroom apartments. Because the schools are going, well, if you build 3-bedroom apartments, more likely to have kids because that's what you would want, a 3-bedroom apartment. Well, let's have a conversation about that. Why not have the families that need apartment living, whether it be temporary or even long term, if their life dictates that? That should be an option.
Yeah, we don't have that diversity.
And diversity comes later. It's not even about.
No, I meant diversity of like 1, 2, 3 bedrooms.
Yeah. Very little diversity of that. If you really look around, it is the concept of a complex having a lot of 3-bedroom apartments. It's fake. And that's reasonable. So to answer,
I'm learning something new too.
So to answer your question, there's a lot of things that the county can do to partner closer with schools so we can both be more effective, solve some of our longer term housing problems, and be more engaged with the board, the board of education, to make sure we're not always stepping on each other's toes. So yes, specific things, yes, we can. So I don't want to say that we can't do anything.
Right.
What we can do is be good partners and make sure that we're working together.
Speaking of working together, you're going to work well with your Democratic colleagues. I'm sure not everyone, feels always the same way about everything, but you can get in a room, you can hash it out. I'm wondering how you approach working with the folks that are on the commission, that are on the other side, that sometimes you have real fundamental disagreements about how to view the world. But you're all in charge of Cobb County together, right? And how does that play in your mind?
I've had really good experience with this. When people often say when you're in the House, even though I was in the minority, and you sit there, you got to deal with people on the other side. Well, it's so many people in there, it can't be that cantankerous. It can't be that hostile. It can't be that. But you're not in the committee rooms every day. Those are small groups of people who see the world completely different. And there are times when you have legislation that you're happy with and you want to see move forward. There are times where you disagree and you understand your job is just to make bad better. I would even say there's some Democratic bills where I felt my job was to make bad better. I think when you get into a role like this on a 5-person commission, you're not going to see the world completely the same every time. You're going to have disagreements. You're not going to see it the right way. But even if it's something that that we may all want, but can it be better? Is what I see my role in short. And it's a much more dynamic role in the sense of everybody on there can play the spoiler, which I think is good for a 5-person board. You need 3 votes. You got to count. I had to count to 91 in the House. You can count to 3. It's a lot easier. But putting coalitions together to make sure the right policy is in place, it's really no different than what I had to do, in the legislature. So I'm not intimidated by that part. I'm not anxious or nervous about that part. I think it's just that's the work. And I would even challenge, regardless of what party it comes from. I know there'll be times where I may agree with one of the Republicans on the board and not agree with the Democrat on the board, because we're all individuals. And that's the one thing you take into these roles is I have my core values, principles, and beliefs, and they're not necessarily partisan. They're Erick's core values, principles, and beliefs. And when there's an opposition to that, my role is to see if I can bring others along to my way of thinking, or if not, how can I dilute the bad into better?
Fair enough. Okay, so last 2 questions that I'm going to ask you. We were chatting a little bit off camera about how tiring this is.
Exhausting.
And we had a conversation before this all happened about running and not running and all that stuff. And what I got from you is that you were undeterred from past experience, that running was what you wanted to do. And I wonder, what has you most excited about the campaign, winning, doing something in the future? Like, what has been it for you that you wake up as early as you do this full days, and you've been doing it? Like, what gets you going about all this?
It's service. It's when you can connect the dots. people boil down the role of a lot of these elected positions as the votes you take. I never looked at being a state rep as someone who took votes. And I would tell my staff that. I said, we're Sherpas. We're like guiding people through this maze of a bureaucracy to help them get what they need in life. Whether it's respite care for a parent who has a child with disabilities, or if it's a foreign officer who is coming back stateside for the first time and doesn't even know how to get their license plate renewed. Or during COVID, helping thousands of people get access to the unemployment benefits that they needed just to survive through the worst times that we had. All of those things give me energy. And then you have the things you're able to do interacting with the community, going to schools and reading to kids, going to graduations and seeing graduates. I mean, I had one intern that started with me in the 8th grade, and I was able to go to her graduation. Now we still communicate. She's in college. That gives me hope. So if you have energy, you have hope. I think that gives you enough motivation to just keep going. And that's really what drives me.
And similar to that, and this would be my final question. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
I mentioned before I started the podcast, before you were here, about meaning.
Mm-hmm.
And one question I ask every patient that I meet in the hospital, every single time, is what brings meaning in their life? What brings meaning in your life?
That shifts from time to time. It's a similar question. My father would never ask people how they're doing when he first met them. He'd always say, "What's your story?" You can find so much out from just opening the door and letting someone have their story. So I think that's a great way that you do that. But for me, like right now, what gives me meaning is my daughter. Making sure that I left her in a position where she's going to have to fight like hell for everything she gets. I want to do as much of that fight right now while I'm still able. Because like I said earlier, I think we as a generation dropped the ball. And so that really is my why right now. And it'll shift, as time shift, as I have grandkids, or if, something else that you just never know. But I think it's your meaning or your why is kind of snapshots in time. But mine right now, my biggest meaning is my daughter.
And it's interesting you say that, because I think there's so many people, and when I'm in the hospital and let's say I'm talking to an elderly patient and their children are there, they'll say, "Oh, it used to be us, but now it's the grandchildren."
But to that point, I mean, like I said, it shifts in time. If you ask a young person what gives them meaning, they don't have kids, they need a career, a job, or it's always going to be different. But yeah, that I think those are great 2 closing questions, because they're really one and the same. Why do you do it, and what gives you meaning? And I'll tell you, the day running and service gives me meaning, that's when I'll quit.
Well, not you said well.
No.
Wait. You mean
if holding an office
or
interesting. Doing it becomes more important to me than the work that's done while in office, it's time to leave. And I think too many people stay in because they like the trappings of service.
Here.
And
absolutely.
If that's your why, you're doing it for the wrong reasons. Let someone else that has the passions of the work and the people do it, because your meaning can't be, your why can't be just holding a seat or holding an office.
Well, I have had a wonderful conversation with the future commissioner of District 2, Erick Allen. And, it's without a lot of the usual curse words that we have when we're grabbing a drink. But I wanted to give Erick an opportunity to explain to everyone who's watching this why they should vote.
So there's a couple of reasons you should vote, and I'm gonna say it. Don't vote because you want to vote for me. I want you to vote. I want you to vote because it's for me. But there's a lot at stake in this country right now. If you think about this race for District 2, this race is the first race, partisan race, in Georgia since Donald Trump was elected the second time. Right on the heels of this race, in April 29th, early voting starts April 19th, but right on the heels of this is going to be the Public Service Commission race in June, with a possible runoff in July, and then you're going to have the municipal elections, where almost 2/3 of all elected municipal officers in Cobb County are going to be on the ballot. Basically, every city except for Smyrna is going to have elections. And right now, there's a sentiment around the country that Democrats are just fed up, but we're throwing our hands up and we're not engaged. I want this election to be a turnout bonanza. I want to show not only Cobb County, but show the rest of Georgia that Democrats are not willing to lay down and watch Trump and Musk take over our country. We're going to fight. We're going to resist. And we're going to make sure that we reelect another Democratic senator, that we reelect people that share our vision at the local level, and that we have new, fresh ideas on the commission. That's what's at stake in this election. So I encourage everybody, make your plan to vote April 19th, which is a Saturday, but no voting on the 20th because it's Easter. But then early voting commences the rest of that week.
21st and 25th?
Yep. And then election day will be on the 29th. So make sure you make a plan to vote, get out and vote. And if you need any motivation on why you should vote in a local election, just understand that as the federal government implodes at the hand of Elon Musk, President Musk, it's going to trickle down all the way to the state and to the local level. Who do you want as that vanguard? Who do you want holding the line at the county level, at the state level, at the federal level? That's all going to be determined between now and November 2026, and we have to turn out. So that's why this election is so important. It's going to set the tone for everything that happens from today all the way to re-electing John Ossoff in November of 2026.